Good morning. How are we? I gotta turn my sound up. It's Wednesday at 7:20, and I'm gonna just do a really quick, maybe like 2 pages, because obviously we don't have that many notes in this chapter. And again, it's a short chapter. It's a really important chapter that's going to lead us into both our discussion of the institution of slavery, enslaving human beings, and then, of course, obviously, Civil War. So we kind of have to get there. Um, as a recap, we kind of thought we had settled everything with the Compromise of 1820 with slavery, that we drew a line, everything below the line, slavery could extend, everything above the line, no slavery. And pretty much, for the most part, slavery is kind of set on the back burner. In our last chapter on the reform movement, I kind of sort of stuck put in, I'll use that word, abolitionism and abolitionists, but we're not quite ready for that because there needs to be something that sparks that movement. And we're getting ready to spark that movement with this manifest destiny. And when people move, they move their things, their ideas, their thoughts, and especially as that movement moves along our southern states. And that will be what we're looking at. We already talked about in a previous chapter about the problem with Texas, that war with Mexico that Texas had for their independence. They wanted to be annexed, but the issue with that annexation or any kind of recognition is that we have to recognize that Texas is going to be a slave state. And that, again, will upset that balance of power. And again, when we're always talking about balance of power, we're always talking about the idea of free states, slave states, balancing out, those senators so that nothing can change for the institution of slavery. Southern states know that as soon as the northern and western states get a political advantage in the House and Senate, that their institution of enslaving people will most certainly be gone. Even though, again, at no point in this abolitionist movement, no point in this anti-slavery, anti-enslavement of people movement is the idea that people are recognizing that those African slaves or now American slaves are equal. So we're not talking about equality. We're just talking about ending slavery. And Northerners want to do that a lot because they understand the economic benefit that the South gets from slavery. They don't pay wages. They don't have to pay any of the monetary issues that come with having employees. So let's get back in. We're on page 2. I just kind of wanted to throw that out because I meant to do that yesterday, but I don't think I did. So on page 2, we kind of looked again at the beginning of that manifest destiny. And again, it's really important to understand that this is an ideology based a lot on religion. This idea that we have done what Jonathan Winthrop said and become this city on a hill of Christianity, and now we need to spread it, and we need to spread it across this continent. And I had been telling you since we started that there was never a guarantee that from sea to shining sea would be one country, right? At any time, there were 2, 3, 4 countries. We still have some parts that don't yet belong to the United States that we're going to look at when we go to war with Mexico. But for the most part, it is now the opportunity for the United States to spread across this big, giant continent. Now, most of the spreading is going to just skip the middle part of the United States, and skipping that middle part of the United States is for 2 reasons. One is the fact that when Lewis and Clark go on their little expedition to try and find an all-water route into across the United States, they don't find one. But as they're crossing that big, giant plain, what they notice, and if you've ever traveled in those areas, there's no trees. It is flat. If you've ever been through Kansas or Nebraska, you can see forever. There's no trees. Zip, nada. And so the thought process then was no trees means the soil is not fertile. That was a clear indication of fertility, was trees, no trees. And so actually in many of our first maps, that whole area is known as the Great Desert or the Great Plains Desert, because it really was like there's no trees, nothing's going to grow here. And so we bypass that, and we bypass that for the coast, the Pacific coast. We bypass that for two reasons: one, to get to California for gold, and two, to get to the other place, Oregon. So when we talk about this manifest destiny, we're not yet settling the middle part of our country. So we're not settling from about Illinois, Iowa to the Rockies, and then we're going to go on the other side to get to that place. So we've got a new election of 1844, and I mentioned yesterday we're going to go through a series of presidents that the average American would probably have a hard time naming. The first one's going to be James K. Polk, who is known as Young Hickory. So that should give you a little light bulb moment. Oh, Andrew Jackson was Old Hickory. James Polk is Young Hickory, so they must have some very similar characteristics and traits, and they do. Historians often extend Jacksonian democracy through Polk. So Polk's really going to be our last hold off on that whole idea of Jacksonian democracy, the idea to winners go the spoils, all those ideas. Now, what Polk wants and what Polk does and what he wants to do is get Texas and get Oregon. Those are the two things that he really wants. And he wants to go up to that 54-40 parallel. Those of you that are very, very astute and you've stared at my back bulletin board of all the pictures of famous people, historical people holding those little signs, and up at the top of the sign, there's an old man and an old woman, and his is hashtag 5440. That's President Polk. So tomorrow when you come in, check out President Polk and his wife. I think hers is manifest. Yeah, she's hashtag manifest destiny. So the number 2 bullet point was Henry Clay attempting to straddle the Texas issue, cost him the presidency. Lots of things cost Andrew Clay. Oh my gosh. Andrew Clay is a comedian from like the 90s. He was horrible. I can't even believe I just said Andrew Clay. All right. Henry Clay, was his wishy-washy flip-flop and unable to make a decision. And on Texas was a big one. We get another political party called the Liberty Party. And it is significant, and I would put a box around this because it becomes important in our discussion leading up to the Civil War, and especially our discussion about Lincoln. And it's the first party created for the anti-extension of slavery. And that will be a word that we will talk about a lot, is the anti-extension. The idea being that at this point in our history, slavery is constitutional. It is in the Constitution that people have the right to these things. We've put out compromises that say where it can stay. And so now we have a political party that says, we get that that's okay. We get that it's legal, but we don't want it to move anywhere else. And this is going to begin what will eventually become the Republican Party that is known today. And it's important to note, again, the founder of this anti-slavery or anti-extension of slavery is in Kentucky. And both of these parties are going to run in 1840 and 1844. Polk is going to defeat Clay fairly easily, 170 to 105. And Democrats are going to claim the mandate for annexation. So what a mandate means, and especially when we talk about political elections, and especially when we talk about presidential elections, a mandate means that that one particular party stood for really one strong issue. And that one strong issue becomes the mandate on which people vote. And in this issue, in this political race, the issue was that anti-extension of slavery. And when Polk wins, what it says to that political party is our mandate of extending slavery and annexing Texas was on the ballot. I won, so therefore the people believe that purpose of what I put on that. Does that make sense? I think I lost my train of thought. So that mandate means those people that voted for that president are approving that mandate. I think that makes sense. So Polk becomes president. At the top of page 3, Polk has a 4-point program. Now, he has it, I'm not sure it's exactly 4 points, but I kind of put it for 4 points to stand for the 4 letters, even though it doesn't stand for the 4 letters. But 4 letters of his name, 4 points, okay? And he does a really good job for a no-name president because of the other stuff that he does. He does a really good job of doing the things that he wants to do. He wants to lower the tariff. And again, from this point, that's what we'll always continue to do with our presidents, lowering that tariff. Restore the independent treasury that was removed by our previous presidents. He wants to get California, and he wants the settlement of the Oregon dispute. So I like COIL down at the bottom. California, Oregon, independent treasury, lower tariff. And then the other part for Manifest Destiny is Texas, Oregon, and Mexican War, because those are the things that are going to happen as well. So we start with Oregon. And every year I talk about this thing and get this whole revitalized interest in this old game called the Oregon Trail. You guys are too young to remember the Oregon Trail. My kids love to play it, and you were on this Oregon Trail and you tried to get from St. Louis to Oregon without dying, and you would die of things like dysentery, or you would get snake bit, or you'd run out of supplies, or something treacherous would happen to you. I don't know anybody ever actually won the Oregon Trail. A couple of years ago when I mentioned it, so maybe the one time Nick Hornback really paid attention in my class, so I was talking about a video game, he found it and then ended up playing it all the time. I don't know where you can find the Oregon Trail. It's one of those old-timey video games. It's like that greenish tinge kind of thing, and the fonts are real, I think they're green, and so it's a very funny video game, but it's out there if you want to try and play it. So that's what we're looking at now. The great Manifest Destiny quest to get to was Oregon. Oregon had great farmland. It was green. It offered opportunity. It's on the Pacific coast. It offered opportunity for businessmen to have access to Asia. And we haven't quite yet in this class talked about that Asian market, but it is about to explode. And being able to access that Asian market from the Pacific coast is going to be very beneficial. So there's a lot of attraction to get to Oregon. But to get there is really treacherous. And so Oregon in 1846 had been in dispute with Russia, Spain, Britain, and the United States. Everybody's claiming a little bit of a little bit of Oregon. Russia is in the North American continent by way of Alaska. So currently, the state of Alaska is being held by Russia. So John Jacob Astor, who is one of the wealthiest men in the United States, the Astoria Hotel in New York is named after him. He develops the American Fur Company. He becomes our first millionaire, and he is peddling in fur, right? All types of fur. When he died in 1848, he was the richest man in America and will remain the richest man in America, because when we build New York City and the way that it gets built, the Astors still control New York City. Spain gave away claims to Oregon in the Florida Purchase Treaty in 1819. We kind of have a little conflict with Russia. Fort Ross is established by Russia in 1812. Monroe Doctrine says, you guys got to get out, kind of thing. Russia retreats to the 5440, and U.S. and Britain become the sole possessors. So we start migrating at the bottom of page 3, start migrating into the Oregon territory. So that Oregon Trail, 1840s, a flood of pioneers are going to come into Oregon, blazed by a trail by Jedediah Smith. It's 2,000 miles. So a 2,000-mile trip in a car, imagine, it is a long trip. But imagine and put yourself in a car for 2,000 miles, traveling about maybe 5 miles an hour. Because now 2,000 miles, maybe we can make it if you push really hard in 3 or 4 days. But imagine traveling 5 miles an hour in your car with your entire family. Yeah, some of you might have fun, maybe for a day or two, but it's not a good trip. It begins in Independence, Missouri, or Council Bluffs, Iowa, and your little statistic says 17 deaths per mile of people that are going to die on the Oregon Trail trying to get, and they die from all kinds of things. They die from just ordinary events that would have killed people anyway. They die of drinking bad water. They die, obviously, of snake bites. We got a couple of Indians going out there saying, well, who are these people and why are they coming through our territory? By 1846, 5,000 U.S. settlers lived south of the Columbia River. Britain only had about 700 people there. Top of page 4, British concerned about the large U.S. migration, and then we've got this disputed area around the Columbia River. And so Mr. Polk gives us this campaign pledge of 54-40 or fight. So President Polk is saying, if we don't get this parallel, Britain, we're ready to fight you for a third time. Like, we're ready to fight for this. Didn't want to trip north-south political balance. Southerners happy. So because of this, Polk has to abandon that. And in early 1846, Great Britain agrees to the 49th parallel. That is why our border on our western part of the United States is such a nice, clean border. It's not a border based on rivers or mountains. It's really a parallel line, those latitude lines that we get that border. And so early 1846, Britain agrees, and we have the Oregon Treaty. So the U.S. receives Oregon territory south of the 49th parallel. War with Mexico influenced many senators to get a quick end, like, we don't want to do what we did already. And northwestern states angry that Southerners got all of Texas, but the U.S. did not get all of Oregon. So that is the end of our lecture today. I am going to add to this a bonus question. It's going to be up there at the top if you've watched it all the way to the end. And again, the bonus question is going to be 100 points divided by however many of you answer it. So again, it's to your advantage not to tell anybody, because last time you 6 little people that answered it got 20 bonus points added to your test grades. So bonus question up there. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. That's why I'm saying it. I'm just going to type it up there. Email me the answer when you get it. And we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great Wednesday. I think it's kind of supposed to be nice outside. Don't forget to check into all your classes, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.